The Girl Who Fell from the Sky. On December 24, 1971, a commercial airliner prepared for its flight from Lima, Peru to the city of Pucallpa. The plane, Lanza Flight 508, carried 91 people on board, including a 17-year-old schoolgirl named Julianne Kupka. She was traveling with her mother to spend Christmas with family in the Peruvian rainforest. The aircraft climbed into the skies under relatively calm weather, but within an hour of takeoff, the plane encountered a violent thunderstorm. Passengers watched as lightning flashed through the windows. Then, a direct strike hit one of the engines. In a matter of seconds, the plane began to disintegrate in midair. Julianne, still strapped into her row of seats, felt the aircraft break apart. She plummeted through the sky, falling more than 10,000 feet, or about 3,000 meters, before crashing into the dense jungle canopy. Incredibly, she survived the fall, suffering a broken collarbone, a deep cut on her arm, and a swollen eye. But survival had only just begun. Alone in the Amazon rainforest, Julianne had no food supplies and no equipment. For 11 days, she wandered through the jungle, following small streams that eventually led to a larger river. She lived off a handful of candies she had found and sipped river water to stay alive. Mosquitoes swarmed her constantly, and maggots infested one of her wounds. Despite her injuries, she pressed on. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks, she stumbled upon a small shelter used by local lumbermen. There, she collapsed. Hours later, workers returned and found her alive. Julianne Kupka was the only survivor of Lanza Flight 508. The other 90 passengers and crew perished in the crash. Her survival is regarded as one of the most remarkable in aviation history. The man who survived a proton beam. On July 13, 1978, at the Institute for High Energy Physics in Proton, Russia, 36-year-old researcher Anatoly Bugorsky was working on a malfunctioning particle accelerator known as the U-70 synchrotron. While inspecting the equipment, he leaned over to check a section of the machine. In that moment, a safety failure caused a beam of protons, traveling at nearly the speed of light, to pass directly through his head. The beam entered the back of his skull and exited through his nose. Bugorsky later described seeing a flash, brighter than 1,000 suns, but feeling no pain. He collapsed almost instantly. Doctors expected him to die within days. Radiation at that level should have been fatal. His face swelled dramatically, and within weeks, the skin along the beam's path began to peel away. Yet against all odds, Bugorsky survived. The left side of his face became paralyzed, leaving him unable to blink or smile normally. He also suffered partial hearing loss, but remarkably, he retained full brain function. He went on to complete his PhD and continued working as a physicist for decades. Anatoly Bugorsky's survival remains unique. No other human has ever survived direct exposure to such an intense particle beam. The Miracle of the Andes. On October 13, 1972, a Uruguayan Air Force Fairchild FH-227D carrying 45 people crashed into the Andes Mountains while en route from Montevideo to Santiago, Chile. On board were members of a rugby team, their friends, and family members. The crash was catastrophic. 12 people died immediately, and several more succumbed to injuries in the days that followed. The survivors found themselves stranded at an altitude of nearly 12,000 feet, surrounded by snow and ice with no food, no heat, and no way to call for help. Rescue seemed impossible. After 8 days, official search efforts were called off. The survivors realized they had been left for dead. To stay alive, they were forced into an unthinkable decision, consuming the bodies of the dead. For 72 days, the group battled starvation, avalanches, and freezing temperatures. In December, 2 of the survivors, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, embarked on a desperate trek through the mountains. After 10 days of hiking with almost no supplies, they encountered a Chilean shepherd who alerted authorities. On December 23rd, the remaining survivors were rescued. Out of 45 passengers, only 16 made it home. Their ordeal became one of the most famous survival stories of the 20th century. Castaway at Sea. On January 27, 1971, the Robertson family of 6 set sail from the port of Plymouth, England, on their yacht, the Lucette. Accompanying them were a 22-year-old student and a family friend. In total, 7 people were on board. Their plan was to sail around the world, a dream journey across oceans and continents. 14 months later, in June 1972, while crossing the Pacific near the Galapagos Islands, disaster struck. A pod of killer whales rammed the yacht, tearing open its hull. Within minutes, the Lucette sank, leaving the family and their companions adrift in a small inflatable dinghy and a makeshift raft. They had only a few supplies: oranges, some water, and a small turtle they managed to catch. They collected rainwater when possible and resorted to eating raw fish and sea turtles to survive. Days stretched into weeks. Their dinghy began to deteriorate, forcing them to transfer to the flimsy raft. For 38 days, the seven endured blistering sun, dehydration, and storms. Finally, on July the 23rd, 1972, they were spotted by a Japanese fishing vessel, which rescued them. Their story became one of the longest-known cases of survival adrift at sea. Trapped in Bluejohn Canyon. On April 26, 2003, 27-year-old mountaineer Aaron Ralston set out alone to hike through Bluejohn Canyon in Utah. He carried climbing gear, a small amount of food, and no phone. He told no one where he was going. While navigating a narrow slot canyon, a boulder weighing nearly 800 pounds shifted and pinned his right arm against the canyon wall. He was trapped. For 5 days, Ralston struggled to free himself, rationing his small supply of water and attempting to chip away at the rock. Nothing worked. By the 6th day, dehydrated and near death, Ralston realized he had only one choice: amputate his arm. Using a dull multi-tool, he methodically broke the bones in his forearm and cut through the remaining tissue. In agonizing pain, he freed himself. Weak but alive, Ralston rappelled down a 65-foot cliff and hiked 6 miles until he encountered other hikers who helped call for rescue. His survival story became world famous, later depicted in the film 127 Hours. Mauled by a bear. In August 1823, frontiersman Hugh Glass was part of a fur-trapping expedition in the Dakota Territory. While scouting ahead, he stumbled upon a grizzly bear with 2 cubs. The animal attacked, mauling him severely. His leg was broken, his ribs crushed, and his scalp torn open. Glass's companions believed he would not survive. 2 men were assigned to stay with him until he died, but after several days, they abandoned him. Left alone, Glass faced nearly certain death, but he refused to give up. Over the next 6 weeks, he crawled and limped more than 200 miles to safety. He survived by eating wild berries, roots, and even raw meat scavenged from carcasses. Despite his injuries, he eventually reached Fort Kiowa, shocking those who had left him for dead. Hugh Glass's survival became legend, later inspiring novels and the 2015 film The Revenant. 69 days underground. On August 5, 2010, 33 miners were working in the San Jose copper mine near Copiapó, Chile, when a massive cave-in trapped them 2,300 feet below the surface. The collapse blocked all escape routes, leaving the men in total darkness. For 17 days, no one knew if they were alive. The miners rationed tiny amounts of food. Each man ate just 1 spoonful of tuna, 1 biscuit, and a sip of milk every 48 hours. Finally, on August 22nd, rescuers drilled a small borehole and made contact. Against all odds, all 33 men were still alive. What followed was one of the most complex rescue operations in mining history. Engineers designed a special capsule, named the Phoenix, to haul the men to the surface one by one. To reach them, rescuers launched 3 simultaneous drilling efforts: Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. Each team used different machines and techniques, cutting through nearly half a mile of dense rock. Progress was slow and dangerous. The rock was unstable, drills overheated, and shafts veered off course. Plan A stalled early. Plan C faced repeated breakdowns, but Plan B, using a precision SRAM T-130 drill, proved fastest and most reliable. Day and night, teams worked under floodlights in the desert, pushing deeper, inch by inch. Every few meters, they stopped to adjust the drill's path to avoid collapse. Finally, on October 9th, the bit broke through to the miner's chamber. The hole was just wide enough, 28 inches, to fit a man-sized capsule. Next came reinforcement. Engineers inserted steel piping down the entire shaft to prevent the fragile tunnel from caving in. Then, the Phoenix capsule was lowered. A narrow metal pod fitted with oxygen, communication lines, and safety harnesses. Inside, miners would stand upright for a 15-minute journey through darkness and rock to freedom. But it wouldn't be simple. Each ascent risked mechanical failure, rock shifts, or panic attacks inside the tight capsule. To reduce danger, the men were divided into groups. The strongest and calmest went first, to test the system. The weakest and those with health issues would go next, guided by medics waiting below. The foreman would be last, ensuring every man was safe before leaving. Before extraction, rescuers tested the Phoenix with empty runs up and down the shaft to check brakes, cables, and alignment. The capsule scraped the walls at points, forcing engineers to widen the narrowest sections. Cooling systems were added to stop the steel cable from overheating. Every detail mattered. One mistake could trap them again. Finally, in the early hours of October 13th, the first miner, Florencio Avalos, was strapped in. As the capsule rose, Chile held its breath. After 15 minutes, it emerged into the cold night air. Avalos stepped out, smiling, waving the Chilean flag. Cheers erupted. One by one, they followed, each ride lasting about 15 to 20 minutes. Between lifts, rescuers greased the shaft, checked cables, and sent down fresh air. If a miner panicked, a psychologist on the radio guided him through breathing exercises. Some carried stones from the chamber as souvenirs. Others prayed or sang as they ascended. The rescue continued all night and into the next day. Doctors on the surface examined each man, checking for dehydration, infections, and trauma. Despite 69 days underground, most were stable, thin, but alive. On October 13, 2010, after 69 days underground, the last miner was pulled to safety. The rescue was broadcast live around the world, watched by an estimated 1 billion people. The Chilean miner's ordeal remains one of the most celebrated survival stories of modern times. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones and feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments.